A fresh Israeli airstrike has hit Nasser hospital in the Gaza Strip. At least 15 people have been killed in this attack. There are also reports of death of 4 journalists in the strikes. This comes after a wave of overnight strikes in Gaza. Russia's defense ministry has said that its forces have captured the village of Filia in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. Even as Kyiv's top commander reported, Ukrainian troops recaptured 3 villages in Donetsk, while Lavrov has stated that he has outlined the terms for Ukraine. U.S. National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. will begin carrying M17 pistols or M4 rifles from Sunday night as part of President Donald Trump's crime crackdown, with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorizing the move. President Trump also suggested expanding troop deployments to Democratic-run cities like Chicago and Baltimore. Bangladesh Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus has warned that Dhaka can no longer mobilize additional resources for the 1.3 million Rohingya refugees, urging global powers to deliver a sustainable solution. Nobel laureate Yunus has presented 7 action points at a conference marking the 8th anniversary of the Rohingya exodus from Myanmar. France has summoned U.S. Ambassador Charles Kushner after his Wall Street Journal letter accused Paris of failing to combat anti-Semitism and criticizing France's stance on Israel. However, President Macron has rejected the claims and has boosted security around synagogues and Jewish centers to avoid incidents linked to Gaza conflict. Iran will hold nuclear talks with Britain, France, Germany, and the European Union in Geneva tomorrow. According to local state media, this will be the second meeting since Iran's 12-day war with Israel in June, when the United States also struck Tehran's nuclear facilities. Cambodia's parliament has passed a law allowing the state to revoke citizenship of people convicted of treason, with 120 of 125 lawmakers voting in favor. The move comes amid a wider crackdown on opposition figures, many of whom have been jailed for or forced into exile since the 2017 ban of the Cambodian National Rescue Party. Indonesia and the United States have launched joint military drills with allies from 11 countries today, set to last more than a week, highlighting growing defense cooperation in the region. The exercises aim to strengthen strategic partnerships amid rising geopolitical tensions. A footage from Gaza's Nasser hospital shows a second Israeli strike hitting rescue workers after an initial attack, leaving at least 15 people dead, including 4 journalists. The IDF has yet to comment on this incident. Meanwhile, reportedly, an Al Jazeera cameraman was also killed in Gaza, according to Al Jazeera spokesperson. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Dan Perry. He's a world affairs analyst, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Dan, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. In light of international criticism like that from Casper Veldkamp, how is Israeli media covering this impact of Israel's current military operations?
So far, the coverage I've seen in Israel is pretty minor, not because they don't care, but because there's great confusion and they don't know the facts. The coverage I've seen speaks of the earlier reports about the strike, which include civilian deaths, but not the journalists. In the last 15 minutes or so, I'm starting to hear on the radio discussion about the journalists that were killed, but they don't know what happened. And this is typical of what's been going on in the war. Gaza is a very, very densely packed place. Israel is bombarding all kinds of civilian areas. And the story is always the same. They believe that Hamas is using those areas for refuge. They believe operations are planned out of those areas. They sometimes claim that the hospitals serve as even offices of Hamas and weapons storage depots. And that it's not necessarily untrue. And it certainly is also true that these are actually hospitals as well. It's an unbelievable tragedy. And I think we're seeing And this is an assessment. It's not really knowledge on the Israeli side. I think that we're seeing something of a light trigger finger at this point in the case of Israel. I mean, you look at the devastation, and it's inescapable that you have to suspect that. In the case of Hamas, I have no illusions about them whatsoever. They really do use mosques and schools and hospitals and civilian neighborhoods to do their operations, what's left of Hamas. But they've succeeded in rebuilding. And I just don't know, and I don't think anyone knows the facts around this particular case, but certainly it reflects that Gaza is unbelievably dangerous for anyone who's there, and that includes the journalists. I do not believe Israel is targeting journalists, except in cases where they claim that those journalists are also operatives for Hamas, which again is not inconceivable. I think the world has some degree of delusions about what we're dealing with, what the world is dealing with as regards Hamas. This is a jihadist mafia that is not above the lowest possible manipulations in order to achieve their ends. And their ends are basically nonstop fighting against Israel and creating a situation where Israel, to go after them, is forced to also create tremendous damage in civilian infrastructure and among civilian lives. It is a total tragedy, and it is reflective of the need that exists to end the war quickly. There is simply no way that this war goes on without a great ugliness and a small likelihood that Israel can actually achieve its aims.
And how do you assess the current dynamics of domestic politics? Is really what we see the visuals coming in from Tel Aviv, like the growing opposition and calls for bringing hostages back. Is it really the case?
Oh, it's absolutely the case that the majority of the people of Israel, 70 to 80%, would end the war, even if that means that for the moment Hamas remains in charge of Gaza. I think that's more bad for the Palestinians than it is for Israel. I don't know too many Gazans who, when they're free to speak, will tell you they still want Hamas to be ruling them. So Israel doesn't want that outcome, and I think neither do the Palestinians. But they're tired of the way this war is being prosecuted. They can see that there is potential here for many more years of essentially insurrection, with Israel ultimately being saddled with control over 2 million people who will need housing and medical services and feeding and education and administration of every kind. And they don't want any part of that, nor have they the resources for that. And of course, that population would be hostile. So I think the Israeli public, by and large, is ready to cut and run, and they certainly want to prioritize the return of the hostages. The government is a somewhat different story because far-right elements that control the government want the war to go on, and they plainly want to have permanent control over Gaza and to settle it with Jews. But that's a very small minority view in Israel, and I think Netanyahu, if he were responsible, would absolutely accept the offer of the opposition in Israel, the moderate liberal opposition, to give him umbrella in the parliament, not vote against the government, even if he loses his majority, in order to enable a deal to be done. It is almost madness, in my personal opinion, not to.
And do you think this, the growing disapproval of current Netanyahu's government, lead to any changes or shifts in Israeli politics?
I mean, the shift would happen in the next election, which will be sometime during 2026, when the way that things look right now, Netanyahu is extremely likely to lose those elections. So what might happen is, as those elections approach, his motivation to end the war somehow and shift gears altogether to a whole different diplomatic paradigm of maybe peacemaking and doing peace with Saudi Arabia and Lebanon and Syria, all those things may conceivably be possible if the war ended and if Israel adopted a different posture towards the Palestinians. I can see him going in that direction because he'd want to win the elections. Whether the people of Israel could be so easily fooled, I cannot say. But that would be, if I was advising him politically, that's what I would advise. And that probably argues for ending the war right now, because he can do a deal with the opposition that would end the war right now, give him maybe 8 more months in power, and then he can start making peace moves. The idea of achieving the goal of eradicating Hamas fully by military means is not science fiction. It can be done, but it involves sacrificing the remaining hostages. It involves more tremendous damage to the Palestinians, and many Israelis care about that, and even the ones who don't can't be oblivious to the damage done to Israel's reputation, international standing, economy, and strategic position. With the continuation of that, the cost is unbelievably high.
Yes.
And it would certainly involve a repeat of the mistake the Americans made in Afghanistan and in Iraq, where you end up being in hostile territory for decades and then leave with your tail between your legs.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation are currently holding a meeting of its Council of Foreign Ministers today. The meeting has been called to address what the OIC describes as ongoing Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people. Member states are set to deliberate on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, Israel's settlement policies, and measures to support Palestinian rights at international forums. Now for this discussion, we go back to Dan Perry. He's a world affairs analyst, joins us live from Tel Aviv. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation are currently holding a meeting of its Council of Foreign Ministers today. The meeting has been called to address what the OIC describes as ongoing Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people. Member states are set to deliberate on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Member states are set to deliberate on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, Israel's settlement and policies and measures to support Palestinian rights at international forums. Now we move on. Russian Defense Ministry says Russian forces captured Zaporizhzhia in eastern Ukraine. Moscow says its troops have taken 2 villages in Donetsk, Serednye and Kleban Bek, along the 1,000-kilometer front line. The advance brings the Russian forces closer to Kostiantynivka, a strategic town in the road to Kramatorsk, home to a major Ukrainian logistics base. Ukrainian officials have not confirmed the loss of the villages, reporting instead that their troops stopped a Russian advance and recaptured Zeleny Gai. New attacks on the village are ongoing. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical analyst, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, this week also we have seen both Russia and Ukraine say different things. They have captured, recaptured, captured, recaptures, but there's discrepancies between both these reports. So given these conflicting reports from both, how does this information warfare play a role in shaping our perceptions?
Sima, good to see you. Good to join you again. It plays a huge effect, of course, because propaganda is everything. Propaganda is total and utter warfare. It is that tool that people use on both sides to then promote, of course, their particular cause and to justify actions, and also to then seek to weaken their enemies' interpretation of what's going on. Assume bluntly, as we are waiting for, even like Reuters, for argument's sake, is saying we're waiting to confirm what the Russians have said. We're waiting potentially to confirm maybe what the Ukrainians have said. All we do know that on the ground, when reports are coming out or they're laid out before us to say they've captured this village, they've captured that village, they've taken this village back that they lost, all that we know, I begin to assume from that, is the intensity of it. We're also very aware for argument's sake, of Russian losses. It's in many ways I sort of get a bit bored with saying it, but it's very, very important because it's profoundly complex. And I don't get wonderful, I shouldn't say I get bored with saying it, because this is so important, because it's involving people's lives, and we want this war to stop. JD Vance has just said that if it stops, then America is turning around and saying, well, our commitment to then backing up Ukraine with by standing with them, and then putting potentially more arms into the situation, boots on the ground, will be something that would happen after the war. The reason why I'm saying that is the complexity of the discussion, and that also plays into the whole propaganda propaganda, but reports from both sides, which is what you're then alluding to. The biggest challenge is the problem is we have a world where instantly on media we want an instant response, and because of what's happening on the ground in the battle, we cannot turn around and say, well, give us a week so we can assess everything. And in many ways that's what we need, but within a battle where things are changing second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, that is extremely, extremely difficult. So people are going back to information over the history, where people turn around and say, well, why didn't the Russians go straight for Kyiv? Why didn't they do that? And then, of course, within another discussion, it's how they then fight a battle. So they've then been trying to draw Ukrainian forces to them. It isn't about avoiding answers. It's trying to explain that the complexities of this are so deep. But we are left with this comment, is the fact that Russia invaded a sovereign country that became a sovereign country in 2021, which 2 days ago celebrated its independence from the Soviet bloc in 1991. Azuma.
Yes, yesterday was, you have also mentioned that yesterday was their Independence Day. What do you think about them celebrating Independence Day while both sides claiming the attacks, and also the POW that we saw today? Do you think this was just maybe to keep up with the morale during this war? What do you think that was signifying towards?
Well, I think you made a very interesting point in regard to keeping up morale. Absolutely. If my assessment is right, and others, the Russians have then taken 20% of Ukrainian land, and that may be about to, of course, it then ebbs and flows. That's what they've done, and the Ukrainians are then fighting for their nation. So when you have a date to say independence, 1991, from being under the Soviet influence for many years, those kind of events are very, very important. You allude to the POW situation. We remember recently, a few weeks ago, that both sides met in Turkey, 45 minutes, and that the discussion mainly was about, within 45 minutes, was about POW exchanges. This is very important. What we then wanted was a longer discussion about the real issues and how we can stop this war, which then led, as you are fully aware of because you covered it, where President Trump then met with President Putin of Russia in Alaska. We have still got to see how this is going to unfold, because at the moment it's not stopping. However, if there is planned another meeting, there may be planned another meeting after that. Whatever, I will say this, that we need those discussions. It's better to have those discussions and praying that will actually lead to an end than actually the non-discussion that happened under the Biden of 4 years, and also other European leaders then, or someone like Boris Johnson, the ex-Prime Minister of the UK, is alluding to the fact that when there was potentially a deal on the table, was saying, no, Zelensky, don't do that. These kind of things going on in the background, and explaining that is very sad. It's not good because of the build-up on where we are now, because it's a huge it seems like an intractable problem, because for it to end, if Ukraine are then asked to say you are going to have to surrender this part of this land to the Russians. And then we then look at the history. We look at the history of the deal that was signed, I believe, in Budapest in 1994, when we said to Ukraine, if you get rid of your nuclear weapons, basically we will stand with you, we will defend you. We have to look at that history and how that is then rolled out. But assuming, coming back to your point, celebrating Independence Day, then people saying for morale, to then say that your country is worth fighting for, etc., with all that history. And Ukraine has a very, very complex history, and Ukraine has always been seen as the breadbasket, Ukraine, by producing grain of Europe. So there are a lot of factors at play here. But we all of us, including myself and my own country, we all want to be patriotic. We all want to raise our own flags and say we have a long list of history, culture, and everyone around the world needs to be able to celebrate their own nation state, even if others believe in mass globalization and getting rid of those nation states, which is a subject for another day. Asuma.
Yes, I agree with you. But going back to the POWs that just happened yesterday in Ukrainian Independence Day, we saw that UAE played a role in that. What do you think why UAE was involved? And also, what do you think that Middle East will be involved more and more? Do you think we will see them being involved in Russia-Ukraine, between Russia-Ukraine?
It's a very, very interesting comment, and in many ways, if I'm honest, I'm not fully sure why are they then involved? Because if we look to then other regions beyond that, the Soviet bloc down on the south, when we're looking at in the past Azerbaijan and all the rest, we look at the tensions there within that region, within Turkey, within Iran as well. It's complex because it does come down to people groups. I am in many ways, if people are facilitating, helping to facilitate discussions, that's a good thing. But for the rest of us, we have to then look what is behind that. Why are people doing that on a regular basis? That's what's very, very important, especially when it involves, I'm not saying in this case, but the whole geopolitically of gas, oil, pipelines, where things are going, the fact that the Russian economy is so dependent on these. What I'm trying to explain is the complexities of this and how so many things are joined together that many of us are not aware of, and we have to get to the bottom of that. But to understand it, to understand why countries then pivot in the direction of what they feel is going to favor them and their development, and then moving forward. But as I would say, is anyone who wants to facilitate peace, ending things, that is a good thing. But there's also to be wary of what is their motivation and why they wish to do that. Asuma.
Yes, UAE's motivation is under clouds, but for sure, them stepping up in it is a good suggestion. Thank you very much, Mark Sutherland, for always joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to Asia. Bangladesh's interim leader and Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus has called on the international community to help end the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya minority in neighboring Myanmar. Speaking at an aid conference in COX's Bazaar, Yunus highlighted the immense burden Bangladesh carries, hosting 1.3 million Rohingya refugees, the largest refugee population in the world. Most fled Myanmar following a military crackdown in 2017. Yunus has stressed that Bangladesh cannot shoulder the responsibility alone. He said that it is not only Bangladesh's duty, but also the responsibility of the international community to share the burden of the Rohingya crisis. He also highlighted the strain on Bangladesh, which is still recovering from the August 2024 uprising that overthrew the government of Sheikh Hasina. While Bangladesh is working tirelessly to support the refugees, Yunus has emphasized that the root of the crisis lies in Myanmar. The aid talks in Cox's Bazar come ahead of the United Nations conference on the Rohingya crisis, scheduled for September 30th in New York. Now we move on to Europe. Senior citizens in Benavente, northern Spain, face fear and uncertainty as wildfires ravage the region. Local authorities have evacuated elderly residents to temporary shelters as fast-moving fire fronts threaten homes and property. Zamora province, with the highest percentage of elderly residents in Spain and neighboring Galicia, have been particularly hard hit. Fires across northern and western Spain have destroyed over 350,000 hectares and claimed 4 lives. Many older residents fear they may never rebuild or replace what is lost. Some residents in Vigo de Sanabria have returned to intact homes, but many others have seen their past and memories consumed by the flames. Authorities continue to prioritize evacuations in safety as the fires slowly come under control. Well, this is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.